Hello and good morning and welcome back to our Kabbalah and Coffee. We are discussing the book of full devotion. We're going to turn around the camera and let everybody have a chance to say hello. And we will start to my right. And there you are.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
And we are in the midst of discussing a very deep and mystical Kabbalistic concept and idea, which began with the question based on the Torah portion of next week. And the Torah portion says that God will bless, talking about going into Israel, and He's going to bless you, will bless the Jewish people. There will be no barren women, and that means that the children will be born and their children will be healthy. You'll have plenty of sustenance, and you will be healthy. Everything's just going to be perfect. There's three most important things, which are health, wealth, and children. That's it. Sustenance, at least, and children. And God says, I will bless you, but there is a caveat. He does say, va'avadetem, when you serve God, then He blesses you this way. The word va'avadetem, that means He uses the term for servant. That means it's work, it's toil to serve God. And the question was asked over here, how do we look at service of God? Because in some places in the sages they say, God, He needs anything. If you say that somebody's working for you, that implies that you can't do it yourself and you need someone else to do it for you in any level. So if you have an employee, the employee is pressing the buttons in the machine and he's doing this and that and the other because you don't have the time to do it, you're doing something else. Or if you have a worker in your house, somebody working in your house because you can't vacuum and you can't wash the dishes and do the washing because you're very busy. So you have someone else, you pay somebody else to do the work. So they're doing the work for you, meaning that you can't do it. So if God's asking the Jewish people to work, va'avadetem, to engage in toil and in labor, that means He's lacking something. He needs something. Does God need something? And so that began the discussion that we are currently engaged, in which we are currently engaged. And the discussion is, you have to say it, even in the highest levels, in the very high levels where God is, so to speak, alone, like the only one, nothing else, that even on that level, there is something that He wants, maybe not needs, but something that He wants to develop. And we began last week to talk about this theme that as far as a journey can go, and as distant as it can be from the infinite level of godliness that is just completely beyond definition, and come down to this world, however diverse this journey could be, until you get down to a place like this world, which is completely limited, and the resources are have to renew themselves. It's not a constant over here. Everything has a beginning, everything has an end, and within the world there are so many different elements. There are people, and there are animals, and then there are vegetation, and there are inanimate, lifeless material. All of this world, because this is the end of the journey, this universe is the end of this spiritual journey until you get to this physical place, had to have been the desired outcome in God's mind when He came to create this world. However far it goes, the bottom, the end, the final part of the journey had to be in the mind of the beginning of the journey. And if that's the case, then as deep and as remote God is, somewhere along the line, within that remoteness, He still wanted something. He still wants something. Need, maybe not, but wants, yes. That's how we began last week's discussion. Oh, hi.
If you're tired at the end of the davening, that means you're working.
That's right. Or could mean you didn't sleep well last night. Mhm. Okay. And then he got into defining of last week. But then we got in last week. The bulk of the discussion last week was from this diagram, which Robert painted a while ago. This diagram gives you 10 round balls that represent the 10 levels of how spiritual energy is filtered into this world. They go through each one of those. And the top one over there is Chokhmah, which is wisdom. And the one on the right is, the one on the left, is Bina, and the one on the left is Das. Chokhmah means wisdom, Bina means understanding, Das means knowledge. Obviously, all three of them are associated with intellect. Now, the difference between them, when you say wisdom, it's a non-definable level within us. You don't know what's in your wisdom. Because as soon as you begin to define it, that means you begin to understand it. Understanding is already a level lower than the wisdom. The wisdom is the essence of the person. That's where the soul is as well. In the mind, in the wisdom of the mind. When you have wise people, it is because these people have gone through life and have learned and studied a lot, and they have taken what they have, and they've become wiser over the time. But what is that? What's in that wisdom? You can't define it. Because as soon as you begin to define it, it enters into a different level. It's called understanding. For example, if somebody was to pose a riddle, a question, say 5 plus 5, and then this one, and that's what, and you start thinking, got it. That flash is your wisdom. Once you begin to develop it and understand it, it's the next level after wisdom called understanding. Wisdom, though, is the highest and most remote and most essential level of a person. That's wisdom. Understanding is not. Get something to drink or eat before you sit down. Understanding
Just need my tuchus knocking over the computer.
understanding something is not defining it. And once you begin to define it, it becomes definable. That's not wisdom anymore. And then there is knowledge, and knowledge means to apply that which you know to any way you have it. You have knowledge in your mind, then you have knowledge that creates the ability to feel it and to have characteristics. And so, for example, somebody knocks on your door. I have a great cause. It's called Kabbalah Coffee. What is Kabbalah Coffee? So you begin to talk, and then the person says, in his or her mind, the intellect goes to work. You begin to think about causes. You begin to think about organizations. You begin to think about giving. These are ideas that are coming into your mind as a result of the discussion that person is having. Eventually, you understand that this is a worthy organization. It's worthy to support it, and now you have to support it. That is through knowledge. Now that you have the knowledge of the place, you've understood it, and now you've applied it to your knowledge, the next step is to apply it to your heart. So your mind, through understanding something, now your heart becomes not just the understanding of it, but your heart wants to be part of it. You want to give, and you want to support, you want to partner with this organization. So then you have the first level of characteristic, which is kindness. All right, my kindness now opens up. I press the button of kindness. I want to give something. Then the discipline comes in. Oh, wait a minute, you can't give all that. I gotta think about whatever. So I gotta make a calculation over here. Then comes the compassion part of it. Oh, but wait a minute. They have this and they do that, and my mother told me that this is a worthwhile organization as well, and she liked to support a similar type of thing. So the other elements come in. And then comes the actual giving of it, and that's another part of the getting things done. So it comes from intellect, and it goes into feelings, and then or characteristics. Then it goes into action. That's the stage of way things work. And when people don't use their intellect, they start failing. They mess up because they are working on feelings, but not on understanding, not on an intellectual level. Now, those levels are all levels within the person, and it's all stages. In your mind, you don't have feelings. In your heart, you don't really have intellect. In your action, it's fueled by them, but your action doesn't think. Your action does. Your action doesn't feel. Your action goes and does. Feelings are not in the action. Action means go and do it because you have feelings that are fueling the action. Your feet are moving because you have a feeling that you need to go somewhere, you need to do something. So each one of these are defined within the person. Then there are transcendent levels. Kabbalah calls them crown, keter. And it takes this crown, this keter in Hebrew, which is not on this diagram, and it says we have the inner part of keter, the inner part of crown, and then we have the external part of the crown. The external part of the crown means that it's more connected to what's under the crown on top of the head, and the external part has a stronger connection to the head. The head is the intellect, and the intellect leads to the feelings, and the feelings lead to the action. So the external part of the head has a stronger connection, and it's more related to the head itself. So it's not the intellect, but it's above intellect, but it plays with the intellect all the time. In human terms, this is a reference to willpower. So we have the intellect, we understand something, and then comes along your will and says, I know I understand, I now fully understand how to do this, but I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. Want, will, desire. I want something done, and despite my intellect, I will change my mind because the desire or the want wants to do something else. A person suffers a tragedy, and the week is over, the shiva is over, and that person has no will, no feeling, no intellectual stimulation to go to work. Comes along the willpower and says, you're going to work. Maybe not because you want to, but because you want to because you have to. So there's a power that can dominate over everything. And that will make your feelings move, that will make your feet move, that will make your intellect move. It's a willpower. And the willpower is everywhere. Not just in the heart, not just in the mind, it's everywhere. So one finger can't say, yeah, but I want to put it on a fire, and the other finger says, what are you, crazy? You want that? There's no disagreement when it comes to willpower. Your head wants it, your toes want it. Every part of you wants something. That's why you have the power. It takes the whole body, it takes the whole person, and it has that will, and it's the power. That's the external part of the crown. That dictates the rest of the body. It's related to the rest of the person, the rest of the makeup of a person. But there's a deeper, more inner element of this crown that is removed. The word that is used in Kabbalah is atik. Atik means ancient, and atik means removed. Removed means that it does not necessarily push anything. There's no power there. It is existing. And that is, in the human terms, that would be related to pleasure. Pleasure, when you're forcing yourself, there ain't no pleasure. When you're pushing things, that's not pleasurable. Pleasure is, you can think of your greatest imagination of pleasure. Sitting at the pool and drinking whatever and relaxing and having the phone doesn't run and nobody's bothering me, nobody wants me. That's one way. Or another way is flying somewhere and landing in whatever. Or whatever. The pleasure can manifest itself in several different ways. But when there's pleasure, the whole body feels pleasure. There's no pressure. It's just pleasure. There's two things about pleasure. The first thing is, it's the deepest thing that we have. And ultimately, everything we do is to feel a little pleasure. So we want to make a good salary so we can enjoy, we can have pleasure from it. We want to have good children so we can enjoy their company. We have good guests and good friends so it's all pleasure. But the other thing about pleasure is, if you keep on having pleasure, it won't be pleasure anymore. It won't be pleasurable. It won't be just natural. Like the guy who came to visit us a while back. We live in Sandy Springs, a very nice neighborhood. And that person came from somewhere in New York that did not have a very nice neighborhood. And he tells me, driving along the trees and the houses, he says, "You live on vacation." Wow, you live on vacation. I said, I have one problem. I work on vacation. It's not vacation for me. Why is that light off? Yes. I turned it on because it's dark on the camera. That is the inner part of the crown. In other words, it's the innermost part of a person. But its pleasure is not in one part of your body. Pleasure, again, is every part of your body. If you had some pain in your foot, then the head isn't going to say, "The heck with the foot, I want to enjoy myself now, so I'm just going to relax and enjoy it." No, if the foot is hurting, then the head is hurting. And everything is hurting. It's not pleasure. So those are the two parts of the crown. Crown meaning something that is transcendent. It sits atop of the head, but yet it dictates to the rest of the body. The willpower is a power, is a force. Come on, get going. I want it. I don't care. Let's move. It's finished. Move mountains. When there's a will, there's a way. Pleasure says, relax. Turn on the soft music. Listen to the waves. And drink your champagne. And just enjoy. That's pleasure. But not just the head, not just the hands, not just the toes, but everything has to have pleasure. And not for too long. Because if that's the case, then it doesn't stay. Okay? So that's the makeup of a person. That's the makeup of God's energy that comes to this world. It goes through a series of what Kabbalah defines as worlds or levels. And in each level, it is reflected in the same way the human beings are comprised. So there is a Keter level, the crown level, which is, as I said, the pleasure and the will, the inner part and the external part. And then there is the intellectual level. Then there is the characteristic level. And then there is the action level at the bottom. And then it moves to the next level. So in each one of these worlds, there are different elements that carry this energy forward. Each time they carry it forward, they have a little say. So when it gets to the pleasure of the next world, the pleasure is going to say, well, we like it, rare. So we like it this way. So the whole world will take this energy and shape it into a certain form, and it'll go through the intellect, and go through the characteristics, and so on and so forth, to the feelings, and it'll end and go to the next world. And each world will take a part of that energy and have a stronger connection to it, and eventually, as it gets down to here, and it looks like this. And in this world, you have people who are also comprised that way. The Keter level, the intellect level, the characteristics level, and then the implementation, the getting it done, the action level. That's how we are. We represent that type of thing in this world. Okay, so that's how it is in definition. Now let's look inside. We're on page 28.
Where the page is marked?
Up on top.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Now we've read this paragraph, I think, twice, but we're going to read it again just to get back into it, and then we will move on to the next paragraph. This means that at the level of the singular master, source of all sources, this is a quote from a Kabbalistic source who says that there is a level of godliness where he is the absolute singular master. There is no other element involved at all. That's the most remote part of God, if you will, or source of all sources. Even on that level, where the God is basically alone, no world, no people, no nothing. Avodah, that means the service, the toil and labor that we are charged with on this world, that service is not at all applicable because God is singular there. And in that level where God is singular, anything that we do would affect that singular and make it more than one single level. It will make it that. Now we have something to do with it. Only with vestment in Seder Hishtalshalut, the word Seder Hishtalshalut means the natural order and progression of things. So, as I said before, you have the crown, then you have the intellect, then you have the characteristic, the action. That's the natural order of things. So only through the natural order of Seder Hishtalshalut, starting with the aspect of Chochmah, Chochmah means wisdom, which begins Hishtalshalut, begins the natural order of things, or Chochmah is called the beginning, and even higher, at the level of Keter, that's the level of crown, which is, as I said, higher than anything. In its lower part, Arich, that's the lower part, the external part of crown, which is the source of emanation. That means that's the source where everything is dictated from, is the concept of avodah indeed applicable. That our service, our toil, our labor, in doing things for God, if you will, or what God wants us to do, does apply to these levels of the external part of that keter, and then the intellect, and then the characteristics, and then the action. That is affected there, but not to atik, the innermost aspect of keter. Atik is the inner, the pleasure part of keter. And what we're going to do is we're going to read the footnotes now, and that will basically put these words into what I was just saying before. So we're going to go back to page 29. And we're going to read footnote 31. Chochmah. Chochmah means wisdom. Chochmah in human terms refers to the highest level of the thinking process, the initial, unstructured flash of insight. In the process of creation, it may be loosely defined as a seminal, highly condensed revelation of godly light on its highest level of immanence that is the life force of all creation. That's, in other words, that's the beginning, the first spark or the first bang or whatever it is that appears into the universe. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't mean the physical universe, because that was the bottom of everything. It means the spiritual universes that eventually lead to the physical universe. Chochmah is the first of 10 Sefirot, or Sefirot means divine attributes, and thus begins the order of descent and development of the world in Seder Hishtalshalut. Chokhmah is the beginning term, the highest part of how this level of one after the next, after the next, after the next, follows in a natural order of events. Chokhmah, that wisdom. Why that wisdom? Because as mentioned before, unstructured, undefined, it's this deepest level as it is within us. It's the beginning of the thinking process. It's not quite the understanding. It's beyond understanding. When we understand something, it's the next level after the Chokhmah. The Chokhmah doesn't have understanding to it. It makes understanding. It is what the understanding understands. But that once it gets down to the level of understanding, it's an understanding level, not a Chokhmah level, not a wisdom level. So it's the first flash. It's the first emanation. So that's Chokhmah, and that, of course, because it's the beginning, it has a certain importance to it, because it's the beginning of everything. All right, now we're going to go to footnote number 33. Keter, literally crown. Keter is a Kabbalistic term referring to a spiritual state that transcends all spiritual worlds. It's higher than worlds. It's higher than Hishtalshalut. It's higher than Chokhmah. As a crown that is higher than and encompasses the head. The crown sits on top of the head. It's not part of the body. But yet it dictates what the person wearing it is. That's a king or a queen. So it dictates what the person is, but it's not part of the person. Keter is the intermediary or the transitional state between Or Ein Sof, or God's infinite light, which, since it's infinite, cannot be defined because it's not defined. It's infinite. Infinite means it doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. It's endless and it's beginningless. So the Keter comes in between this, takes the infinite light, and it has a pretty infinite character to it, and then it connects it to the finite, defined spiritual worlds. So therefore, you have the Keter that still has a very high level spirituality that is called Or Ein Sof, or in English, the infinite light. And it also has a definition of the next worlds coming to it. So therefore, Keter has these two levels, the inner and the outer. Now he's going to define it here. As such, Keter is comprised of two parts. A, the inner aspect of Keter, called Atik Yomin, or Atik for short, for it is Ne'etak. Ne'etak is from the same root of Atak, which means completely removed. That's what Atik means, removed and separated from creation and from the world. This level is attached to Or Ein Sof and is Atik, or removed, from any association with human service of God, since it is transcendent and cannot be affected by the worlds at all. This Atik level, Atik meaning removed or ancient, like far away, it is the one that carries the infinite level of God. It is the pleasure level of human beings. It is completely and totally remote. We don't have pleasure all the time, and our pursuit is always to try and get there. We always want to find another way. Let's go away for a couple of days and enjoy, have pleasure. Let's go to our favorite restaurant and enjoy, have pleasure. Just for a couple of hours, and then the food will be gone, and then we'll just have pleasure. That's all it is. We're going to be removed. We're going to a place where we're not in our routine. We are going to be removed to ancient. We're going to go away. That's the inner part of the Keter, because the inner part of the Keter is associated with the infinite light of God. So then there's the outer level. Now B, the outer aspect of Keter, called Arich Ampin. The word Arich Ampin is Aramaic for long faces. No, not long faces of people who, Red Sox fans or some Mets fans, but long faces are a reference to the faces, meaning the levels, but they are bigger. Just like you had the levels of intellect and feelings and action, they're all in the same level, and they are all much stronger defined. Once you get to an individual level, it's very limited. It's limited only to that level. So the next level after all of this would be, after the intellect, would be chesed, or kindness, or love. Love is limited. Why is it limited? Because too much love isn't good. If you give love to the wrong people, isn't good. No, it has to have a certain limitation, and it's only limited to love. It doesn't have discipline to it. It doesn't have compassion to it necessarily. It doesn't have anger to it. So it's limited to one thing. Long faces means that it's all there together. Long in the term mean basically bigger, or the higher element of it, the source of everything, and it's all in it together. The outer aspect of Keter, called Arich Ampin, associates with the finite structure of the worlds, and even though it's not necessarily it's not necessarily finite itself, but it already is associated. It has those levels within it already. You can feel that there's some limitations coming along, and the 10 Sefirot that inhabit those worlds. Arich is thus related to the created worlds that emanate from it, and is therefore affected by the service of God in the lower realms. So, coming back to what we began to discuss, the verse says, if you worship God, if you serve God, if you toil to God, and God will bless you and will respond with all those blessings, which part of God is this referring to? It's referring to the highest level possible in terms of where humans can reach, which is the external part of the Keter, the level of willpower, if you will. That's where we can go. You can't reach the higher level that is removed, because that removed level is where God says, I am the only singular level here, and there's no connection to the finite levels of the world, which is where we exist, where we do our thing. Okay? All right. Good. Number 30. Page 30. Back to that page. In the text. Before we study the text, though, we've got to explain a very fundamental Kabbalistic and Hasidic point. And that is going to be in footnote 35. Footnote 35 talks about Kalim and Orot. Kalim, the word Kali, or plural, Kalim, is vessel or vessels. The word or means light. We all know that. Orot is a plural for or, meaning lights. When the Kabbalah talks about God's projection into this world, the projection of energy of God into this world to create this world or whatever it might be, it uses the definition of or, of light. It could use a lot of things. It could use a flow. It could use the metaphor of flow. It could use the metaphor of giving. It uses the metaphor of light, because light, of course, illuminates. And light basically goes as long as you take it. Another thing with light is that you can put things in between, like filters or colors, and the light won't be affected, just the other side of the light. Well, nothing will happen. The light won't stop. It'll just project in a different way. You can stop a light with a wall, and the light will just go till the wall. That's all it will do. Or you can change around the lights in different colors, going in different directions. You can play with lights like that. So Kabbalah likes to use the term of light. The lights, which is again a metaphor for energy, the energy coming from God, which we term as lights, needs to be accepted somewhere. It needs to be put into a place which can define it. That's the Seder Hishtalshelut. That's the natural order of things, where each level takes that energy and does something to it. it changes it somewhat. So the love energy, the love vessel takes the energy that comes into it and defines it as a love, as a kindness. When it gets down to the next level, this energy has now entered into the realm or the vessel of discipline. So now the love that has been added to this energy, and therefore it augments the energy somewhat, has now been defined, disciplined in the second level. And then when it gets to the third level, there's compassion added to this energy. And then eventually, as it moves on to the end of this world, the end of this level that it's in, the energy that has entered is different than the energy that's going to exit, because it has been defined by all these kalim, by all these vessels. These vessels, each one of them stands for a different aspect, as it is with human beings. You have the energy, the thought that you want to donate, you want to give to a worthy cause. Now your heart has to be on board. So your heart gets on board with the feeling of giving. Then the discipline comes along and says, I know you want to give, but you can't give everything. So you've got to discipline, you've got to know when to give and how to give and so on. And then you have the compassion level. And then you have the endurance level. That means you made the decision, you're going to go through with it. There's the fifth level, which is humility. I know I've given money, but so what? What is it? Why should I have to, whatever? And that's how these definitions work. So by the time the energy has gone through the person, it's gone through the intellect, it's gone through the characteristics, the energy may look a little different from where it started. It started with, all right, we're going to give. Oh, wait a minute, how are you going to give? When are you going to give? What are you going to feel like when you give? These are all the characteristics that end up taking that energy. By the time the energy is finished and you're actually given the check over, a lot of things have happened. A lot of stages have happened since you decided to do it. An amount, a time, a style. Are you going to give it with a smile? Are you going to give it with this? Are you going to send it in the mail? There's a lot of things here. All the things that lead to the final giving. But the energies have changed now. The energy of giving has been defined. Now, when you take that to the next level, so when you try educating another person to give, then the energy that you started with is going to go through that person's intellect. And that person will define it differently. They want to give much more. And they want to have a big name out of it. They don't want to have humility. It's a whole different world. Each person is different. And that's how it is with these worlds as well. So you have energy called orot, the lights. You have what defines that energy is the vessels. So it's like something going into a vessel. You take it and you do what you want with it and you pass it along to the next level, the next characteristic, the next refinement. Okay, so let's look at footnote 35. Kalim and orot, literally vessels, or you can say instruments, and the other one is orot is lights. Creation is a composite of orot and kalim. Spiritual light is invisible because it's spiritual, not physical. It becomes perceptible only in conjunction with something that reflects the light, or the keli, or vessel. You have to have something to take that light, to take that energy, and define it. Hold on to it. Keep it. Thus, lights and vessels are as inseparable as matter and form. Matter is the energy, and the form is the definition of that energy. So you can have energy in rocks, you can have energy in plants, you can have energy in animals, and you can have energy in humans. And each time the energy is different, there's more or less, and it's defined differently by the form. There's the matter and then the form. Thus, lights and vessels are, we just did that. Examples. The power of vision is light. We can only see when there is light. When there is no light, one cannot see. I was in the Blind Museum, which was in Atlantic Station in Atlanta. I was also in the Deaf Museum, by the way, in Israel. And it's the same idea, same principle. The principle is you go into this place and it is pitch black. That means they don't even allow even the slightest drop of light. And you literally cannot see it. For 1 hour, they take you through there, and your eyes do not adjust at all. And they give you a blind stick, so you can try and feel your way through. And you are led, you're guided through a series of places by blind people, but completely blind people. Now they know their way around. It's when they get out of there that they have a problem, and that's when light comes in, because you cannot see without light. So these people are seeing by tapping, by feeling, by listening. So they take you across the street in the total pitch black, and you hear cars coming and flying. You don't know where you're going. They take you into a store. You've got to buy an apple, you've got to buy a green pepper, and you've got to buy some carrots, and you've got to pay for it. And this is all, huh? Take you onto a boat. They take you to pick up the mail and go back home, walk up the stairs. There's all kinds of things that they give you to, boy, do you ever appreciate what these blind people can do, because, we are lost without being able to see. And then I went to the Deaf Museum in Israel, and they put on these big, heavy noise beater headphones. We were not allowed to say one word. And a totally deaf Russian took us through this, bright and light. And she was laughing at us. We couldn't see what she was seeing, what she was showing. It's right in front of your face. You don't notice certain things, but those who don't hear properly look very, very carefully. And they see these little subtle things, and that gives them the idea. It's the same thing with the deaf. They say, oh, she really made chicken out of us. She made nothing. Because she showed us how we're not utilizing the power of sight that we have, the sense that we have. So we use little, with half brain tied behind our backs, we use little of our sight, little of our hearing, because each one of them takes the other, helps the other one out. So light, to see something, you can't see anything without light. And as soon as the light comes in, you can start seeing. Without light, you cannot see. You can hear, you can feel, you can smell, you can't see. So let's see, examples. The power of vision is light. The eye is the keli, is the vessel with which the light is seen. The mind is light. The brain is the keli. The mind meaning the undefined part of this, the thinking part of it. But the brain, if you open up a brain, you're not going to see a mind there. Well, depends whose brain. But if you open up a brain, one sees matter there. One does not see the intellect that person was thinking. You can't touch intellect. You can't see intellect. It's remote. It's not something, it's physical. So the light is the intellect, and the brain is the keli, is the definition. The idea is light. The words conveying it are kelim, of vessels, of vehicles. The light and the vessel must be compatible. Obviously, they got to work together. They got to work in tandem. The vessel must be a fit for the contents. No container can contain anything beyond its capacity. So the light that comes into the container better fit in there. If it doesn't fit in there, something's going to give. Either the light won't go in, or the container will break. So as I did this morning, I turned on a tap somewhere in Maryland, and the water came gushing out. And I was holding this thing in my hand, and the whole thing went right down into the sink, because it became very hard very quickly. So the light was too strong, the vessel couldn't contain it. So the vessel lost out. Now if I would have held on tight, the water would have come in and just splashed right out, because the vessel can't contain such pressure of the light. The light is too strong.
When people have too much intellect in their brains.
And not enough kalium, not enough vessels to hold that intellect. They go, these are mashuganas. They're very smart, but they can't fit into society. I have a guy who's been calling me. He called me 10 times in the last 12 hours. He's from New Haven, Connecticut. He's called the Flume. That's what he called, Rabbi Flume, excuse me. He's ordained rabbi at any level he could have achieved or reached. He is a certified accountant. He passed the bar exam in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, all 3 states, within 2 weeks. He knows every single vice president, president, whenever they came, wherever they left, and who won the World Series in 1932. All of that stuff. It's all in his head in an instant. And boy, what a mashugana. And he's telling me on the phone now, it's coming to an end. He's going to jump off a building now. Because he's like depressed. You think to yourself, the guy has such talent, amazing lights. There's no vessel. The vessel can't hold his lights. You go mashugana. Now, who needs that gift? Those lights are the vessels being pushed out of his hand and dumped into the sink. Let's see again. The light in the vessel must be compatible. The vessel must be a fit for the contents. No container could contain anything beyond its capacity. If the glare of the light is too strong for the eye will be blinded. It will not see anything and simply will not function. A teacher who wishes to convey an idea, which is light, to a pupil must reduce it to the pupil's mental grasp. It's got to fit into the definition, got to fit into the keli. Otherwise, the student will only become confused. An analogy. A word consists of 2 or more letters. When the letters join in a proper order into a word, they form a vessel for a concept. If you break up the word into separate letters, the concept vanishes. It's confusion. There's no more keli, there's no more vessel. Both the orot and kelim, the light and the vessels, serve a united purpose and work together to form creation. The inherent purpose of creation is for mankind to serve God. When the service of God is performed, it completes the keli that allows a particular spiritual revelation or light to become revealed in the world. So when we do what is right, we complete that vessel, and now the energy of God fits into that vessel. God blesses you. When you work and you toil, He says, I'll give you all these blessings. Therefore, the lack of serving God creates a blemish in the kelim that in turn do not allow the light that would otherwise be revealed in that keli to shine. If the work isn't done the way it's supposed to be done, then the vessel isn't complete. If the vessel isn't complete, then the light can't be contained in it. The lack of divine service thus affects both the function and the purpose of the kelim and the orot, preventing them from being revealed in this world. So those 2 work together. One of them contains the containers contain what goes into them. But if the containers are not proper containers, or they're not fixed, or they're not complete, then the energy spills out. It's confusion. Then the words are no more words, it's just letters. And the letters are not definable. However, levels of godliness that transcend orot and kelim do not need a purpose to be served in order to exist. When you talk about the godliness that's on his own, there is no kelim, there is no energy, it's the essence. When you're talking about, for example, the sun, what comes out of the sun is light. But the sun itself, it doesn't need that light. It doesn't need a vessel. It's the essence of light. It is light. It's light in its purest form. So it doesn't need it. It doesn't need the energy that comes out of it, and it doesn't need the vessels to contain that energy. It is energy. The existence of that godliness is not for something else. Rather, it exists on its own, for itself, and therefore is not affected by the human service of God or lack thereof. So now that is the definition of keli, of vessels, and orot, and of energies that are supposed to fit in the vessels if they are indeed created as vessels. What does that all mean? Stay tuned.